I actually will be talking about other people's projects because they're amazing. And I'm going to be talking about crowd control and how you can harness the masses for fun and for profit. Because if we're not doing it for one or the other, I'm not sure why we're doing it. So we're going to talk today about crowd creation, which is really about creating crowds to come into your project, co-created projects, so building projects with your audience, and then crowdfunding, which is always a crowd favorite. And then I'm going to talk with Luke and Yomi afterwards about their projects and their ideas about this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is crowd creation. So for a long time, there's been this sort of big wall between creators and their audience. There's been these weird Nielsen ratings where someone in Idaho decides that we really want to watch 2.5 Men, and suddenly that's what we're supposed to watch. And there's these weird kind of test groups of random people, but now we actually have this opportunity to talk to real living people and find out what they're watching, how they're watching it, where they're consuming it, and why they're consuming it. And I think this is pretty great. So we're going to look at 2 projects. We're going to look at I'm Here by Spike Jonze and Hunger Games and see how they did that. Throughout this project, I have sort of bigger and smaller projects to kind of see how the big companies do it and how some of the smaller people are doing it as well. So the overview of Spike Jonze, I'm Here. It was a smaller project that he did, so I'm not sure if everybody knows about it, but it's essentially a robot love story. So robots love, all good. And so what they did was they actually paired up, so it was kind of a branding project as well. So they paired up with Absolut Vodka, who thought this was a good opportunity, and they created this project together. So the engagement strategy was interesting because what they did was they really wanted to create an engagement strategy that matched the film so that when the audience had an experience, it related to the experience they would have when they got to see the film. So they had these really fun events all over the place. They had all these pop-up screenings. And some of them were as random as the side of a van in some city. And you would go by and there would be like a screening of this film. Then they had other ones where there were clues and you had to go and find it. And then suddenly you would be in like a parking garage with 30 other people and you got to watch a special screening. So all of these were kind of ongoing, and at the same time, there was these kind of teaser marketing posters and little clues around cities. So again, it became this very sort of playful experience of getting to know about this film. And then they had unconventional screenings, which were very like specially only advertised to certain people and very small. And they kept this going. So they did it up to the lead up, and then they did it afterwards as well. And then afterwards, they had events like confessionals, video confessionals, where people could go in and tell their own love stories and talk about their own experiences as well before and after the film. So all of these things really gave it a kind of grassroots element, but what it did was it brought in the crowds. It brought people in so they had an engaged experience, so they felt really involved in this movie. Even though they maybe didn't have any say in how the movie went or how the story went, they got to feel as though they had like a part of it. So it really built this crowd from a kind of grassroots place. So with that project, it worked really well for them. So they had kind of a pretty good ongoing presence for about a year with all sorts of events. The Hunger Games, on the other hand, is kind of a different beast. They obviously have money, and so they can do things in a little different way. I mean, Spike Jonze does, but this was definitely a much broader campaign. But they still ended up using I think it was about half the amount of a traditional media campaign, and they ended up being the 3rd film on the opening weekend for like a summer blockbuster, which is pretty damn good. So the way that they did this was that they built their audience again. So they didn't just assume there would be an audience, although there was through the books, and they didn't just assume there would be an audience because they were a big company. They actually took the time to really figure out who their audience was and where they were. So they went through, and so there was sort of 2 things that happened with the Hunger Games. So one thing was that the Hunger Games itself looked at who their audience was and looked at how they played online and where they played online. And so they created 8 sites that were separate from the main Hunger Games site. And so they had these things where the fans could make their own content. There's YouTube channels with teasers. There was all these different ways that audiences could get involved that was beyond just seeing a trailer, so they really started to get involved in the project early on. It also gave them an opportunity for them to have, there was a really high awareness of this movie before it even came out, and when they did testing, I think there was a huge number of people that had already heard about it prior to that was much higher than a regular traditional campaign. But the other thing that this did was that it actually started the ball rolling where audience members realized, oh, wait, if they're doing this stuff, so can we. So they started to build their own, and they ended up creating their own games and their own apps and their own stories, and they just kept going with it. And they've actually created this huge community of fan-created sites. And so they're sort of living the story in their own experience. And this was before the film came out. So by the time it came out, they already had rabid fans. They'd already been connected and involved and engaged in it. So what they learned from it, and this was from their words, is how they figured out how to do this was really figure out who your fans are. And I know this sounds obvious, but a lot of times it seems like people just decide they're going to send this out to this random demographic. But if you really figure out who they are, and where to get them, you can really get them engaged. And then this other one also seems obvious, but really exploit the platforms for what they're used best for. Sometimes we try to place other elements on top of a platform that just don't work. So really make sure that you know what your platforms are and how to use them. And again, keep the source, your book, your theme, your story as the main thing. And that's the same thing that the Spike Jonze did as well, was every element related back to the story. So nothing is separate. Everything is part of this greater world that you're creating for your fans so that they can really feel like they're part of that space. And this one that cast a wide net, I think that would work for Hunger Games. Some other ones I think niche might be better, but for them, they really wanted to make everyone feel inclusive. Everyone's part of this team. Everyone's on it. If you decide to participate, even by just showing up at a site, your Team Hunger Games, yay you. And send out lots of teasers. Send out lots of stuff. Let people see it. Let people be aware of it. Let people find the space that they're most comfortable to play in, and give people lots of opportunities to find the space that they see themselves in it. Make it events. People love events. People like going to stuff. They like feeling like they're part of things. And traditional media is great, and it's still got a great place. So if you can use that, but turn it into a space where, again, people are just part of it, it's great. And the great thing about social media is that they can feed off of each other. By building everything in silos, you're kind of wasting the greatest opportunity of social media, which is to really build off each other and create these conversations at these larger levels. And adapt. Be able to plan your projects so that you can adapt to your audience. I mean, strangely enough, these guys actually weren't prepared for the fiction they were getting, the fan pictures, they weren't prepared for how much fan involvement they were going to get, and it took them aback at the beginning, and it took them a while to actually take that on. But then they eventually did, and I think to their betterment, because then people really, again, felt part of it, and why turn down that energy of your fans? And then don't forget that once the property comes out, that's not the end. You have this sort of fan base to continue, not only through to the DVD, but this is a franchise. So now they've built up this audience, they can build it along for the rest of the ride. So the next thing I want to talk about is co-creation. So co-creation is the thing that seems to freak out a lot of traditional writers. They're so scared that they're going to lose their story, that they're going to lose their voice, that they're going to somehow lose their creative ability if they let other people into the project. And I think that there's some projects that have done such a brilliant job of being able to bring people's voices in and make that kind of like an alchemy that makes it a better experience for people, rather than kind of a group created where you lose the focus. So the first project we're going to talk about is Robot Heart Stories. This project is so super cute. So this project is Lance Wheeler and, what's her name? Where are they? Lance Wheeler, Janine Saunders, Lilo Ridge, and Elle Jansen started this project. But from the beginning to the end, they co-created it with a huge team of people. They had volunteers, they had teachers, they had kids, French kids in Montreal, and then English-speaking kids and Spanish-speaking kids in LA. And the entire story was built on all of those people co-creating the story as they went. So in the end, this was actually an arc that they came up with after the project was done, because they actually didn't go out with, this is the story arc of this little robot. And the idea with this little robot is that Leica is the robot, and she landed in Montreal, and she has a physical little plush robot, and the kids had to actually use their history and geography and all their classes to propel her across to get to LA, where she would then be sent into space. So they actually came up with this story arc through that cross-collaboration process, but it emerged out of the experience and out of the co-creation, rather than them imposing it at the beginning and saying that this is the way the story would go. And so the thing that this is great for, especially with kids, is that they really got to feel as though they were part of this story, and they got to see how their part of this co-creation was meaningful and how it mattered to the story. I think it's very dangerous if you tell people that they're co-creators in a story, but you don't actually give them that space to be it. They need to be able to see that their actions have a reaction to it. And this project did a great job of that. And they actually did launch this little robot into space, and she went up with the kids' artworks and her stories and all the stuff that propelled her to LA. So now the kids can look into space and know that they did something wonderful together as they co-created this story. This project was co-created all through to the end, even for the research part, and they've been really open about sharing what they've been learning and what they haven't been about the process. And so they realized that the things they really learned were about in the co-creative process. You need to make people feel as though their ideas are part of it. You need to have, again, that room for adaptation and evaluating as you go along, and have room for social commentary so people can talk about it as it's happening. They said that some of the things that they're still learning how to do, and I've discovered this with my projects as well, is these things around trusting and sharing and the confidence to create. They're still difficult to get people to really get into that space and feel comfortable to, again, let go of that sort of, I don't know if ego is the right word, but let go of that experience of saying this project is mine rather than this project is ours and our ideas are shared. So I want to talk a little bit. Most of the projects I've got today are all entertainment-based projects, but I wanted to throw in this one. It's a little bit different. It's an art project called Post Secret, and it's very simple. They just ask people to take a postcard, write a secret, mail it in. Very, very simple. But they've been going for years, and they've had hundreds and thousands of secrets, and they're everything from funny to poignant to sad. I mean, the whole human experience is in this project. And I think there's something very valuable about trusting that your audience will bring that to you, trusting that they know how to share personal experiences that will be meaningful as you co-create together. So the last one is the crowdfunding. And I'm sure all of you have heard of crowdfunding projects. It's not a new thing. It seems to just have a resurgence lately. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look a little bit at just crowdfunding and an overview, and then a success story that I've been looking at recently. So the stats that I have are all from Kickstarter because they've been much more open about their statistics for their project. And as you can see, it's less than 50% success rate for the projects that do get funded. Although I would argue that if you look at it, sort of at least a lot of Canadian funding when you're writing a grant, that might be higher than your success rate on that. So it's a bit of looking at what the right variables for you are. I mean, the other thing to know with the crowdfunding and the monetary ones is the highest line there is actually projects that are under $1,000, or under $10,000, sorry. And so in keeping in mind if crowdfunding for the monetary part is the right thing for you, it's really figuring out if that's the kind of money you're looking for, or if you're looking for a bigger pot for what your project is. And also keeping in mind that it's the amount of money and the amount of work, which I think both Yomi and Lucas can talk to a bit later, is a bit of a balancing act, figuring out how much work you want to put into it and how much you're going to get out of it, because the reality is it's probably going to be under 10K for quite a bit of work. But in saying that, I think that there's lots of important kind of outcomes that you can get from crowdsourcing that aren't necessarily just monetary, that actually go back to the first two objects. They really go back to audience building, they can really go back to marketing, they can really go back to getting your audience involved in co-creation as well. And so I think when you can get a story that does all those three together, that's when you can get success stories. So this story is fabulous. This is a project that's happening, I think the first one is in 3 or 4 days in Australia. And so these guys started out, and they wanted $10,000. In 20 days, they got $243,480. And it's just been going since then. So they have done an amazing job of being able to not only fundraise, but really bring everyone together. And the reason that they got this is because they're really good at all the factors of it. So the first thing that they did was they posted on YouTube and they posted on Pozible, which is an Australian version of Kickstarter. And so they promoted it on Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, everything that they could think of. They put it out there everywhere. And the thing about this video is that if you ever get a chance to watch it, these guys are so funny. They are so passionate about zombies and guns and video games and this project that it's absolutely infectious. They just are so excited, and it's fun to watch, and you want to help them out, and you want to be part of it. So their project went back through all of the phases. I mean, the reason that they made so much money is because of their audience development and their marketing. So they started out, and they really wanted to turn their audience into advocates. That was their biggest thing, because they knew there was only 3 of them. And there's 3 of them, and I think they might have hired a few extra people. But they knew they needed to get other people to get the word of mouth out for this. So they just put everything online. They're super active online. They still, even though they are launching in 3 days, answer every email. They talk to everyone that calls. They go to every interview. And they really connect with their audience. And they connect with their audience in funny ways as well. Like, they have had all these little contests for them to name zombie teams. They had a bowling week last week. And I mean, they're doing really well, and they still decided they needed a bowling day to go out with their fans. And so they're just really having fun with the whole project. They also have been aware that the crowdsourcing isn't the only way that they're funding this project. That's one thing they're doing. They have no public funding for this. They're totally doing it on their own. So it's through key partnerships, ticket sales, strategic partnerships, and selling stuff. So they have merchandise of stuff to play in the game, and merchandise that you can, have your zombie mug that you want to take with you. And so their rules, which you'll probably notice are quite similar to the ones that the Hunger Games was the same kind of thing. Be really active online, really know your audience, really, get involved with them, use all the free tools online that you can to organize, and just get your message out there as often as you can. Keep generating content, keep bringing people back, and all of those things together, you've got an audience that's willing to donate money to you. So these are the things that I figure are pretty good rules that come out of all of those case studies around how to crowdsource. Find your audience, respect them. Don't just assume they're going to do anything because you found them and you have this great thing. Really find out who they are and if they like what you're doing. Be adaptable. Make sure that you can plan for change, because it's going to happen, and that's the best way that you can really follow your audience and figure out where they are. What was the next one I had? So, sorry, talk to your audience. Don't assume there's this wall between you and them. You know where they are. You can find them and talk to them. Let them know that you're listening, and not just your PR people, but the creators and the producers and the people that are making it. They need to know that. And show your enthusiasm. There's so many people that think they need to be so serious when they're pitching their projects, but if you love it and you want other people to love it, the only way to do it is to be super enthusiastic. And the other thing is to be realistic, whether it's crowdsourcing your audience, whether it's creatively crowdsourcing, or whether it's crowdsourcing for money. All of these things take a lot of time, and if you don't love it and you don't know it, it might not be right for your project, because it does take a lot of your time and energy. Understand your platforms. Make sure that you know what you're doing. If you're just decided that you're all excited about this stuff, that's great. But either do research or find someone you can work with that understands how these platforms work with your audience, because your audience will know in a heartbeat. And then leave room for your audience. You don't need to have every little corner planned out. Leave room for that crazy thing to happen and that person to disrupt and that weird thing to happen that you're like, oh my God, and follow it and let it happen and let it be part of it. And your audience will be so excited that they really got to be part of that experience. And that is the end of my talk, but I just wanted to let you know a little bit about, so a lot of these case studies are from a project that I launched with Dr. Siobhan O'Flynn last week. And so all the case studies are on there if you want to look at them. All right, so now I'm going to invite up Yomi and Lucas to the stage, and we're going to have a bit of a conversation.
Hi.
Hello.
Look, there's people.
Hi, people. So I'm just going to give you guys a chance to maybe introduce yourselves. I have your bios from up there, but I'm just going to maybe give you a chance to introduce yourselves.
Hello,
Should we talk into this? Okay.
I'm Yomi Ayeni. I'm creative lead at Artisipate Media. We're a small production house in London.
I'm Lucas Johnson. I run the Transmedia Vancouver meetup group that you should all come to. And thank you. I'm a writer and transmedia developer. I run my own business, Silver String Media, and I'm a partner on a project called The Time Tribe that I'm going to talk a bit about as well.
So I think what we might do is give these guys a chance to present their works, and then we're going to have a conversation about some of the successes and failures they've had around crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, and other kind of crowd creative projects. So would you like to go first?
Sure. So I've been working on this project called The Time Tribe for about a year and a half, and it's a time travel adventure game for kids that's based in real history and archaeology. It's online, Flash-based, iOS, with sort of some transmedia elements. We have a comic book. We have physical objects that kids can get in the mail. And back in June, we did a Kickstarter campaign to help fund part of the project. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with the crowdsourcing side. So we ran the campaign for 3 weeks. We did a lot of research beforehand because there's a lot of data out there about Kickstarter and about running sort of successful campaigns and what works and what doesn't. And there's really interesting stats involved, like if you reach 30% funding, there is a 90% chance that you're going to succeed your entire campaign. The vast majority of the money you make is going to be in the first 3 days and the last 3 days. So there was a campaign that Zay Frank did for his new project, and he decided to make it just a 7-day campaign because that middle period wasn't going to be worth it for him. So we decided we'd do a 3-week campaign, which is a little shorter than sort of the typical Kickstarter campaign, based on that logic. Which I think ultimately was kind of a mistake, as it turns out, but it was such a learning experience for us altogether. So we launched this campaign, and on Kickstarter you get like your little video, and then you get all of the space to talk about the project in text, and then you get FAQs, and then you get all of your rewards that you can put in. We're not filmmakers, my business partner and I, so we knew we couldn't do like a really good quality polished video, which they say is important and is. So we sort of went for the camp side. We made a bit of a campy video, which some people seem to like, but I'm not sure it ever really got the attention that we wanted it to. So we found a lot of the campaign was sort of getting our friends to fund us and our friends to talk about us and trying to reach out to various communities and get the word out. And the amount of work that went into the campaign was enormous. For those 3 weeks and for about a month beforehand, we weren't doing much other than dealing with the campaign. There was a lot of planning that went into it, creating the video, working and rewriting the text that people would see, because that's your impression. That's how you are going to convince someone to give you money. And that's huge, especially when you don't actually have a product that they're going to immediately get as a result of that. So we reworked that text tons of times. We actually changed the text partway through the campaign. When things were slowing down after the first week or so, we reevaluated what we had out there. We talked to a few people, what's your impression of this? So, doing that kind of research, I think, is extremely important to just get out there and say, what do you think? Would you give us money? Why might people not be giving us money? And we were trying to do too many things, I think, with the project. We were trying to make it sort of a pre-sale and then also make it the there's sort of two ways that a lot of projects in Kickstarter get money. It's either it's a pre-sale, so if you pay and if it succeeds, you're going to get something out of it. Or it's the sort of goodwill side. It's we're just this tiny little company that doesn't have the budget to make the thing we want to make, and we need you to help, and we're going to love you for doing so. And we kind of tried to walk a line between that, which, trying to take from both strategies, and I think that didn't really work. We were saying we're sort of a small company, but we have this thing, and we can give you stuff. So ultimately, we succeeded the campaign in the last 2 days. We ended up actually raising about 120% of what we were asking for a total of about $31,000, which was incredible. And I think the biggest thing for us was in those last few days, or in that last week or so, we started reaching out to other Kickstarter campaigns. So we would find other campaigns that were kind of similar to ours and say, we'll put out tweets and Facebook posts and a Kickstarter update that says, hey, if you guys like our project, you should go and check out this other project and fund them as well if you do the same for us. And a lot of people in the Kickstarter community actually really got into that. And we had seen a couple of people do it sort of before us. And because people if you're doing that, you know what it's like to run one of these campaigns. And if you can help out somebody else doing it, you're going to do that. So it was just an incredible thing. And we actually got some adventure game communities to really give us some shout outs. Tim Schafer, who is the guy behind Double Fine, which was the Kickstarter campaign that raised $3 million or whatever it was. It was insane. I think it was the first Kickstarter campaign to raise that kind of money. He makes adventure games, and somehow through one of the other Kickstarters we were communicating with, found out about ours and made a little post about it. And that's sort of where I think if we actually had that extra week to let that momentum build, that might have helped us a great deal, and we didn't have that. But it was very stressful. It was a lot of fun in some ways. So I actually have a clip about sort of sizzle reel of the Time Tribe, so we can run that so you can sort of see what the project's like, hopefully. So just to finish up too, I think one of the things that we did with that crowdfunding campaign was the people who backed us at a certain level were invited to be our beta testers. And this sort of goes in with some of the other crowdsourcing stuff that Anthea was talking about. Once we had a working beta version, which was about a month or two after the Kickstarter campaign ended, we could invite those people who were already invested in our property and cared about sort of what we were doing and say, okay, we have it. Come in and test it and tell us what you think and tell us what we can fix. And we had a lot of great feedback from that very early on that we could then take and try to fix the game for our release. And I can talk about that a bit later as well. But I'll let Yomi present because his stuff is awesome.
Well, thank you so much. And we have lots of questions, but for sure we'll let Yomi present his. Is it the newest project that you're working on?
I've got some stuff on.
Great.
If I can. This is going to have to be quite quick and brief, if I may. Can you give me a quick hand? The project in question is called Clockwork Watch, and it's a bit of a different one from my previous project, which this one sets out to redefine the British Empire, to tell a story along non-colonial lines. And I hope this works. Let's have a look. Yes, great. Okay, if you can pardon me on this, I'm going to rush through a lot of stuff. There's quite a lot. It's a little bit further along than Lucas's, but I hope it all makes sense. That's me, and the project's called Clockwork Watch. As I say, it's told in 4 stages, and this is going to mainly not be done as me. While I'll try telling you the story, I'm going to tell you the processes and how we have incorporated crowdsourcing into every step of the way. Clockwork Watch is an interactive sort of narrative told about a world where Queen Victoria has to reach out to an Indian scientist who's created this thing called kinetic energy, and that energy is what's used to power these clockwork automatons. So steampunk is like this rather bizarre, anachronistic sort of genre that is like a cross between Jules Verne and some weird-ass sci-fi stuff, where you've got unusual technology in a modern or old context. Anyway, so it goes like this. Queen Victoria reaches out to this guy, come over to the UK, create this thing, help put Great back into Great Britain. At that point, very similar to today, the country's on its knees. It's more or less bankrupt. And basically, we're also tapping into quite a few of the current things that are happening to the world. The first part is to do with world building. Britain's in recession. Queen invites this guy over. The second part is to do with father-son relationship and how the world can be built and helped built by the public. And the third part is the bit that excites me most, which is we get the world and the community as such to help crowdsource and crowd build this world. And into that world, we plant a love affair. And every single obstacle that people more or less put into the world over a 3-year period becomes the thing that more or less makes that love affair forbidden. So they are more or less crowdsourcing the whole universe. And a lot of people don't know it's all about man falls in love with machine in a world where that love is forbidden. We're going to be announcing those details a bit later on. Anyway, Clockwork Watch comprises of 3 graphic novels, an online world, live events, a theatre production, pop-up shops, a feature film, an interactive book, an anthology, and a whole load of free stuff that we're making available. Every single one of these elements is open to tweaking and creative adjustments by the public. You going to change? Okay, one of the first things we did, which was kind of unusual, we chose Indiegogo. The UK has not got access to Kickstarter. It's I think, Canada and the US. So I had to go with Indiegogo because they opened their hearts to us, and we had to jump into bed with them. But one of the good things was how we structured the campaign. We were telling a narrative that we wanted the public to be involved in from the very, very start. So, after launching the campaign and appealing to them to say, we're trying to create this make-believe world, it's clockwork, it's steampunk, it's this and that, and hitting all the right areas, then we opened a new tier and we said, by donating about $40, we're going to sketch you into the graphic novel. And this was part of a long-term strategy that we had in place. So a lot of people jumped in. Hey, I can be part of a graphic novel. That's really amazing. They didn't know there was a lot more to it. With the way we structured the campaign, we actually managed to we were nominated and won Indiegogo's Best Campaign of 2011. And that's because of the engagement, the way we interacted with the people, the rewards we offered, even down to Christmas last year. And I know some of our patrons, and I call them patrons, some of our patrons are here. I hand wrote every single Christmas card to them and posted them myself. And the feedback I got of that was phenomenal. Someone said, I can't believe someone has done this, and went through the number of people who donated the money to us. We raised £6,500, which is about $10,000, and this is how we spent the money. And you'll see how we got the best part of £100,000 worth of stuff in kind and in resources for £6,500. Okay, first thing we did, draw the world in, help build the world. Set up a shop, said we were creating a live event, appealed to all the respective communities that we wanted to hit, said, come to this whole steampunk event. It starts a process. It starts a narrative. The narrative is going to last 4 years. We went to the steampunk communities and all the rest. We actually built a Victorian street market underneath London Bridge. We excavated a tunnel that hadn't been used since 1954. Traders, we appealed to the traders, who are the makers. There's all this maker fair and all the rest of the maker ethic. We got them to build kiosks and stalls and all the rest. We found a caterer who specializes in Victorian street food. We put them in. We built a Victorian pub in as well. And then we invited people in. We got a listing in Time Out that on Monday we had about 20 people. On Friday, before the event, we had about 250 people come to the event, which was great because they all came in respective costumes. They all brought their respective characters. Some of them, knew that they were going to be part of this whole process, and they wanted to really get involved. We expected them to stay a few hours, 4 hours. At the beginning, no one knew what they were getting. They walk in, and there's this big sign that says Lost and Confused. They go to Lost and Confused. It gives them a series of tasks. They stayed for 9 hours, immersed in this space. They ate all the food the caterers brought. The caterer made more money on tea that day than he's ever made in any other gig he's done. But then we also said, some of the people were told the journalist that was meant to be covering this event had been kicked out. So please write a report and upload it to a website. Thus, we started the process of actually crowdsourcing the content. With Clockwork, we decided that we're not going to film a single thing. We're going to let people tell the stories themselves. We haven't got a Facebook page, we haven't got a Twitter stream, we have none of that. All the interactions have to be interpersonal. It's a high-risk strategy, but it's something I would like to try. And it's something that so far has worked quite well. With regards to content, I went online and started finding things like this, where people have started filming their own stuff and uploading. We told no one to bring cameras. This is the only footage of our first launch event. And I quite like the way the person's added the extra little treatments. Anyway, these are available through our website. Sorry, we haven't got much time. The other thing that was quite good, the people are talking about disruptors and all the rest. What was also quite unusual was, even though no one knew what the story was and all the other stuff, some guy turns up and says, I've read a little bit about this. I know it's about clockwork automatons. I know that they've got to be trade unions in this world. And he started a protest. And he printed all of this stuff that he was handing out to people on day one. You have to create an opportunity for people to bring that to the table. And I'll tell you how this came into play a bit further on into the show. Now, what was also quite unusual was all of this stuff was for this. The money we raised was to produce this, which is the first graphic novel that we've released. At the very back of it, we've got a list of all the patrons, because we had to thank them for being really, really great. Inside, you've got the best part of 40 of them as characters in the universe, which is very, very important for us. The other thing that they didn't realize was, by interacting with these people for 9 hours, they then found out that the lady in the corner there was also featured in the graphic novel. In the 8th hour of the event, we pulled out a table and started selling these, and people actually then made the leap between what they'd experienced for 8 hours and the story as continued in this. But then the reports, people started reporting online, talking about the story. They became co-creators within this universe. All the content online is released under Creative Commons. They own their own IP. We don't touch it at all. We want to encourage them to carry on creating. As a matter of fact, further on down the line, I'll explain how an announcement I'm about to make, has blown me way off course. And then we were approached by a company who hosts an event called Latitude. 40,000 people come to this event every year. It's a theatrical event in the UK. They wanted us to come back and do some more stuff. Come over, bring your 9-hour show. It's amazing. I said, well, yeah, we will. So will you do the 9 hours? No, we won't. Why not? This is an ongoing narrative. The public have contributed a colossal amount to this. The story continues. They said, so what are you doing on that week? I said, well, that week, the trade unions are out on strike. They've called a national strike. You know, the country's paralyzed. You know, and she said, brilliant. I said, what do you mean brilliant? She said, because that's Bastille Day, so come and hold your protest and kind of go marching. You know. So we did. And with that, we then produced our second little arsenal, which was, we covered most of the UK with this, and we did a limited run of a poster that was plastered around by the Union for the Casual Labourer, explaining that we're all out on strike, which became another little artifact, which kind of went down quite well, brought more people into the narrative, into the context, but also the people who... the people who co-created and were creating characters were then... I mean, we're talking about a £60 ticket to get into the event. We got free tickets, and then we took them to the event in their own character, so they could actually be there and protest with us. And we had a picket of trade unionists up front, and then we built a science lab where the scientists were right behind, you know, because the trade unions were up in arms because they believe when the clockworks are made, they'll be out of work. So we had the science lab, and anyone who wanted to see the marvels of Victorian science had to walk past the picket line. Some people did, some people didn't. You know, so we rolled that out, and that went down really, really well. And then we even went further by giving people the opportunity to actually take their narratives and go further. Anyway, I'll rush through this. This was the first film that we shot of the event, that we actually shot at the live show, which I can't show, but these are available online. And I said there's quite a lot of this.
Stop the clock! Stop the clock! Stop the clock!
Anyhow, the second graphic novel's out with more people in, which is really, really great. It shows the story has progressed with creative adjustments by the public. This is an alternate reality game which is just launched, which a lot of people haven't quite worked out how to crack it yet, which gives us more time to add more content and some of the stuff they've created within the world into it. We're happy to say today we are launching the second part, which is Clockwork Watch kicks off, and the second half of it is going to be mainly based in Canada. So we're going to you'll be seeing some of these plastered around the country. What else? Also, are you going to change? Within the narrative, we've launched our very first business. Someone's raising 17,000 Kickstarter through Clockwork Watch, which is her own business and her own entity. And the movie. We got the movie, but the most important part is, with all of this, we have just signed a deal with A71 in Toronto, who have bought the rights, taking the rights to develop the actual film itself. There's a whole lot more associated with this, but that was the news that I wanted to talk about. We've done all of this on £6,500. Thank you very much. My name's Yomieni. Bye.
You should just be like keynoting or just like talk for the rest of the day. I don't know.
That was so great. Thank you and congratulations. That's amazing. So we've only got a few minutes left. So I have, oh no, that's fine. That was a great project to see. So I have lots of questions, but I'm sure you guys too. So maybe I'll leave the 5 minutes to questions from the audience. Is there any out there? Oh.
There, here.
All right, thank you. I have one very small comment and then my question, but first my comment is for Yomi. You'll be happy to know that Kickstarter will allow UK-based projects from October 31st. And now my question is, it's amazing what we've seen out and what people coming out and doing all this. So psychologically speaking, what do you think it is that makes these people tick, especially when they have access to so much content? Is it just that you're letting them live out their fantasies, or is it actually something more than that?
Giving people a chance to let their minds breathe, giving them a make-believe space they can feel comfortable in, and actually rewarding them by showing them that what they're contributing actually does make a difference. And that is all. That's the only thing I do.
Hi. Both really great examples. Congratulations. Loved it.
Thank you.
Question for you is, how much facilitation do you have to do at these live events?
Some a lot, some none. I mean, with the Tomorrow's World today, colossal amount. The other, none. I mean, we're actually working with various steampunk communities in Canada to bring the live shows that we're doing here. Our main thing is to work with local people so that we don't bear the brunt of the whole process, so to speak. We get paid to do them, which is great. So it means we can pay all the actors and all the rest. But it swings one way and the other. It's not we're not making money out of Clockwork Watch at all. We are just showing people that it can be done, and whatever little opportunity we're given with regards to putting on events and carrying the story forward is greatly appreciated and on all counts.
Hello. Quick question about the Creative Commons license. Is there any danger of encumbering the property when you're moving into mainstream development with that?
Of what? Of
encumbering the property, like scaring off a potential broadcaster because they're not sure if someone's going to pop out of the woodworks and say, well, that character was actually created by me and you don't have the rights to that in the film.
No. What we're actually trying to do, and I sincerely, we want to do this project in Canada, so I hope I'm not shooting myself in the foot here. But what we want to do is we want to create a world or a story that the public have enough sway on, so that a broadcaster or funder will come along and say, we have an audience. The story starts in India. I don't want to be in a partnership where someone says, well, hey, this character has to be from, be it Belgium or be it the UK. But at the same time, there's a slight green line between the content that we're creating online and what we're doing. We're not even offering the online world to anybody. The online world solely belongs in our hands and the hands of the co-creators. We've only optioned, in some cases, the graphic novel and the film script. And whoever's taking the film script has to acknowledge that the love affair takes place in a world created by the public. The story's tight. People love the story. Boy falls in love with girl. And the trials and tribulations are amazing. But then we want the public to make those creative tweaks. The rest of the stuff is more or less ring-fenced from commercial pressures.
It doesn't affect the chain of title. The potential distribution partners are not like, I'm not touching this.
No, not so far. And we've put that on the table from the very start. There's a limit to what I'll do. From the outset, I had told everyone I wouldn't go near America with this project if you paid me $1 million in cash. I had from the outset said we're going to mainly do parts of it in Canada. And anyone who's tried talking to us about this has known from the outset that the online world is totally out of bounds. And that is why people are able to launch. We've got about 3 businesses coming out of this concept. We're not talking about small little things. Someone's launching a drinks brand through Clockwork, and they own it.
I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you guys. Oh, sorry.
Could you explain why not the U.S.?
The US, the studio system tends to rape and pillage. I love the people people trust me implicitly. They gave me money. I have no track record in crowdfunding whatsoever. When you ask people to give you money for a project like this, they are not just giving you money to produce something. They're buying into the core idea. Even though it's on paper, in some cases maybe not even on paper. They haven't seen a tangible thing, but they trust you implicitly to produce something that they've bought into. They've bought into your dream. And I don't believe America could ever facilitate that.
I just add to that when you have people that are giving you that kind of money when you haven't actually produced anything to show for it, at that point, or they haven't received anything immediately, there's a whole bunch of trust there. And if you betray that trust even a little bit, you're going to be done. And they're never going to trust you again, and they've left your property. Period. So you have to be very careful with those the relationships that you make by doing a crowdfunding campaign. You have a very close relationship with those people now, and you have direct communication with them, and you have to really treat them as well as you possibly can.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. That was wonderful. Thanks so much.